My presentation over the impact of the performing arts on ninth grade English reading and writing. This took place at a school called Bard and Bravo High School. The big topic of this, I chose this topic because of the increasing issue of the decline of ninth grade ELA proficiency scores, specifically here at Bard and Bravo High School, as shown by recent assessment data. I think the decline was most likely exacerbated by the challenges created by the COVID-19 global pandemic, as well as the lack of peer interaction opportunities that occurred during that time. If you actually look at some of the research on the topic, different artists or different authors such as Halloran, Oster, Pierre, and Wang basically said through their own research that there was a significantly negative impact on overall achievement levels by COVID-19, with specifically economic disadvantaged students, English learners, and students with high rates of chronic absenteeism. And they all kind of experienced a little bit more of an achievement gap during this time. Barton Bravo High School is a Title I school and has 65% that are economically disadvantaged, a strong percentage, over 45% of English learners, and our rates of chronic absenteeism has grown significantly over the past few years as well. This caused Barton Bravo to be a very good location to test whether or not the implementation of the performing arts would increase overall English scores, specifically for ninth grade. Greenfader and Elrott also kind of suggested that the performing arts integration and other contents can prove beneficial for improving overall academic scores. In their research, they proved that students who participated in performing arts-related activities were 2 times more likely to be proficient in reading over the course of a few years. And so, to try to test this theory specifically at Bard and Bravo, I planned the implementation of performing arts-related standards and content in specifically ninth grade ELA courses over the course of about 3 to 4 months. The standards specifically that we looked at to implement came from the Florida Department of Education, as that's where Bard and Bravo is located. The 3 main domains included critical thinking and reflection, historical and global connections, skills, techniques, and processes. Each of those domains, I think, worked really well with English classes, specifically the critical thinking and reflection. In English class, students would be able to have the opportunity to analyze a play or script, which helps them to be able to discuss themes, character motivations, and plots. Moreover, they could actually act out some of these scenes as is standard with performing arts related standards. As far as historical and global connections, students had the opportunity to be able to read and analyze the historical plays or scripts, as well as connect to how different plays might have related well to different times in history. And as far as the skills, techniques, and processes, English classes allowed really well the opportunity for students to be able to even write their own plays or create their own dialogue and act those out as well. So English classes do a really good job of being able to be cross-curricular with performing arts related standards. As far as the actual research design itself, it was a simple process that basically I had to introduce a project to a couple of instructors. I was using 3 instructors. They were all of the ninth grade instructors that are at Barda and Bravo. Introduce the project to them, introduce kind of the idea behind it, and show them some of the research as well. And then I also completed a professional development over performing arts implementation. Since I am a performing arts instructor, I was able to kind of give them tips and tricks into actually being able to implement different performing arts related standards into the English curriculum. And this includes things like how to successfully analyze plays, how to get students interested in a play, how to successfully get students to cooperate when performing scenes from a play or writing dialogue. After that, there was the baseline testing. At Bard and Bravo, we utilized the FAST ELA state assessment. There's PM2, which takes place in basically late December, the middle of the school year, and then there's PM3, which takes place at the end of the school year. There's also PM1 that takes place at the beginning of the school year, but that was not related to this specific research design. So PM2 occurred, and as well as I implemented a argumentative essay to get a baseline of where they were in their writing abilities based on a rubric, a 40-point rubric, which I'll explain here in a second. So the baseline testing occurred, and then we implemented all of the standard domains of performing arts related standards into the English ELA. Throughout this process, I checked in on the instructors to see how it was going, gave them tips and tricks, and tried to squash any problems that they were having with the implementation. And then after the couple months of implementation, then we had testing that was specifically PM3, as well as a second writing argumentative essay with similar prompts and identical rubric based on Common Core ELA standards. And that was to kind of see where they had improved from PM2, the baseline, all the way through the post-implementation. And finally, after that, I kind of evaluated the data to see where we stood, to see if performing arts integration actually did have a positive effect on the students' scores. As far as the actual data collection and procedures go, like I stated earlier, BARD and Bravo does utilize what we call FAST testing. It's a Florida Department of Education standardized exam that the students are required to take for graduation. Specifically, I was looking at the second progress monitoring as well as the last progress monitoring. So PM2 occurred before performing arts standard implementation, and PM3 occurred after performing arts standard implementation. The way that this specific standardized test is graded is through quantitative scoring, 1 being a very low level of achievement and 5 being a very high level achievement. For the most part, students are supposed to be within the 2, 3, and low 4 range. 1s are very low level achievement, and 5, again, being at a very high level. For the writing specifically, I looked at creating a argumentative essay with an attached standard-based rubric. All of these standards were based on the Common Core ELA standards, and each of them were out of 40. So there was 4 main standards, each worth 10 points, and that was graded 1 through 10 on each of the standards. Following that, you got an overall score, which I divided into 5 levels to kind of go along with the reading levels. So 1 to 8 would be level 1, 9 to 16 would be level 2, and so on and so forth, all the way being 33 points to 40 points is being level 5. And again, that's just to try to get a comparative between the reading, which is graded 1 through 5 as a level, and taking the writing rubric and grading that level 1 through 5 as well. The techniques that I used was simple comparative analysis of the average scores. So I could have gone really in depth with trying to figure out overall increases between like PM1 to PM2, and then see how much that increased, and then PM2 to PM3. But to keep it kind of simple, I just did an average of the scores. So what was the average score of PM2 fast versus the average score of PM3 fast? In a similar way, I took what was the average rubric score and level of achievement from the writing before implementation and then after implementation as well. And then just overall comparative analysis, as well as I did determine the percentage of increase to kind of get a better understanding of how well or how much the students increased, if they did increase throughout the implementation. So as far as the data actually goes, this is the overall scores for the reading analysis. So I used a histogram to kind of show the overall division of achievement levels. On the left, you'll see that PM2 has a high number of level 1 achievement. And again, this takes place in the middle of the year, so I'd be interested to see what PM1 looks like, to see how much there's been growth there. But you can see the average score from PM2 is about 2.05 level of achievement. At the end of the implementation, when they took PM3, you could see an increase up to 2.55. So this is a relatively average achievement level, but we did see an increase of almost 0.5 average. And using this following formula right here, taking the PM3 minus the PM2 over the PM2, multiplied by 100%, obviously, to get a percentage, this calculates to about a 24.3% increase, which is, I don't think, anything to scoff at. As far as the writing goes, in a similar way, I showed the kind of the levels from pre-implementation. So these are the January scores. Again, this was out of 40, and then based on what they actually scored determines what level they would fall into. So the overall average score from pre-implementation was 21.85, which would land you in about a level 3. And then after the implementation, when they took their writing exam again, they had about a rubric average of 26.83, which now puts them specifically in level 4. So about a middle of level 3 all the way to level 4. That calculates to about a 22.8% increase using a similar formula as the writing. I also wanted to see what the impact of instructors were, to see how they might have changed. So we had 3 instructors, A, B, and C. They have different levels of experience, with C actually having the least amount of experience. So if you look, it's pretty interesting that C has the most increase with the reading increase. She had about a 27.56% increase. With the writing, she had about a 28% increase. Compared to the other twos, that's more. And it's interesting because she has considerably less experience than the other two. A did relatively well, and B did not do. There was still increase, but compared to the other two, not as much increase. One of the limitations, which I'll talk about here in a second, is the fact that instructor B did have a health emergency during our research project, and they were out for a little while. And I think that might have impacted the overall performance from instructor B, since the substitute that took over had not participated in the professional development. Overall, I think the average suggests that there is a positive influence of implementing the performing arts in the ELA curriculum. But again, there's important things to note and limitations that kind of occurred. Number one is the timing. I don't think the study was long enough to actually be as reliable or valid as I'd like it to be. So I think a longer study that lasts either throughout the entire school year or lasts over a couple years and follows students specifically could make it a little bit more reliable or just overall more significant of data to be able to analyze. Another thing is external factors, I think, resulted. There was a lot of scheduling changes in the last few weeks of implementation, which limited time in English class. Normally, they would have about an hour and 40 minutes, and on a lot of these days that the school schedule adjusted, they dropped down to only about 45 minutes in class. Other things I think that might have influenced it as far as external factors go: personal circumstances of students. Some students were able to get jobs throughout the semester, and instead of being able to go home immediately after school and then go to sleep, they started working until 10 o'clock, and they'd come to school a lot more tired. So I think that might have played a part in skewing some of the data. And then just overall simple teacher turnover. We're at the end of the semester as well, and I think not only the students themselves are losing motivation, but I think some teachers are as well. And I think another limitation is the instructors. I mean, like I said earlier, instructor B had a health emergency for a week during the research, and although the substitute was great, she did not go through the professional development on how to actually implement performing arts standards. And also instructor C announced that they were going to be changing jobs. So I think they might have lost their motivation to continue to kind of make it all the way to the end of the school year. They did last all the way until the end of the research project. Overall implications, I mean, again, I think it shows promise for the implementation of the performing arts in different curriculums. This was looking specifically at ELA, but I think there is something to be said for implementing performing arts related standards in other content areas as well. Again, I think those can be a positive effect for this type of cross-curriculum standard implementation, but I think the research shows, and the limitations obviously that I had as well, it's not a cure-all for the academic gaps that were created during COVID-19 pandemic. So the overall research question of how can the performing arts implementation increase reading achievement, and how can it increase writing achievement? I think it can, but again, it's not going to be a cure-all. It's not going to be a magic thing that fixes academic gaps that were created. As far as recommendation goes, I think it would be very, very helpful for all teachers to go through a professional development that teaches them and provides them skills to be able to implement performing arts related standards. Even just simple moving around the classroom and working with partners and collaborating and creating things that performing arts really emphasizes, doing that in other content areas, I think can definitely help student achievement overall, and doing a professional development can equip the teachers with all of the necessary skills that they need to be able to actually incorporate these practices in their own classroom. Future applications, it basically is saying that there is definitely promise, but I think further research is definitely needed to improve validity and reliability. Specifically, the limitations that I had affected the reliability of my research project, and overall more research should be done. I think another thing that could be done too is implementing performing arts related standards in different contents to see, is it just English that it works positively well, or can you implement performing arts related standards in a science curriculum or a math curriculum and see similar trends? Something that's a little bit more reliable, something that has consistent instructors throughout the whole thing and maybe a longer period of time can create a more significant data. The overall conclusion, again, I think it's super promising for the performing arts integration. And if more research can be done, I think that's going to go over well. While the limitations that did exist throughout my thing, I think the overall positive trend shows and highlights the importance of taking proactive measures to address the overall proficiency score declines created by the COVID-19. This was one suggestion on trying to improve the academic gaps that were created, but something should definitely be done. I think I encourage just educational institutions to consider incorporating performing arts into their curricula, and by doing that, they would have to provide professional development to support the overall effective implementation in their classes. More research needs to be done, and less limitations, and I think we'd have a lot more significant data. Thanks.